Yes, ma'am. I think we're ready. The recording has now started, and we welcome everybody to the next agenda item here for the afternoon and this orientation marathon that we're calling this. And I'm grateful that we have Mrs. Elizabeth Grovenstein with us as the System Office CFO to talk a little bit about budget and funding and FTE and all those exciting things that help us get the paycheck at the end of the day, but also give us the resources we need to serve our students. So I'm glad that Elizabeth is able to join us. And without further ado, Elizabeth, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kelly, and thank you for having us this afternoon. We have been digesting the new budget that's coming out the last day or so. So I have not yet incorporated that information into this presentation, but certainly we'll be happy to answer questions if folks have questions about the budget that was just released. So with this presentation, I'm going to touch on the budget and the basic funding formulas and FTE. So the first slide up is an overview of the state's general fund appropriation for education for fiscal year 2020-2021. Of course, you may be aware that we don't have an enacted budget for the current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2021-22. That began July 1st. But as I mentioned a minute ago, there was a conference budget that was released just this week. And so we have been in the process of figuring out what is in that budget and how that will affect community colleges. So for now, until we have a fiscal year 2021-22 budget enacted into law, this shows you the budget from last year of $14.4 billion. Education is the largest portion of the state's budget. And the community college system, when you look at the education pie of $14.4 billion out of the total state budget, the community college is 9% of that. You see that in the red pie slice at $1.23 billion. The university system is at $3.16 billion, and public schools right under $10 billion and 69% of the state general fund budget. When we talk about the state general fund budget, just to make sure everybody's aware, we are talking about mostly the tax dollars that the state of North Carolina collects from income, corporate income, and sales tax. There are a few other revenue streams that are called non-tax revenues as well. Those all make up the state's general fund appropriation. The next slide touches on the legal authority for financial support of institutions, of the colleges. Why does the state support the colleges? What is the legal requirement? So for the community college system, we have a general statute. In our general statute is known as General Statute, or GS 115D. That's in our state laws. And there are specific laws related to funding. For the state funding for community colleges, that law falls under General Statute 115D-31. And the law says that the state provides the operating costs for instruction, administration, and support services for colleges. This is a summary of that law. Then on the right side of the slide, the local counties have responsibility for funding community colleges as well, and that is in General Statute 115D-32. The community colleges receive local funds for the operation and maintenance costs of your colleges, including the personnel costs associated with the operations and maintenance of the college facilities. And then capital construction is the legal responsibility of the county as well. But the state of North Carolina has provided historically state funds for capital. And there is a general statute as referenced here in that same general statute 115D-31 provides that if the state does provide capital funds, that those shall be matched. In this law, it says on a dollar-to-dollar basis, $1 of state funds, $1 of non-state funds. However, with regard to capital, even though the law does, this law specifically spells out this matching requirement, there are definitely times when the capital does not require a match or may require a different matching requirement based on another specific law about that capital funding. For example, 2016, there was Connect NC bond legislation called the Connect NC bonds that were providing capital funding. The community college system received 350 million of those funds. And that law that established the Connect NC bond did not require a match for repair and renovation projects at colleges. And then the match for new capital projects, new construction, was a different matching requirement than $1 to $1. So if the General Assembly chooses to enact a very specific law about capital and matching funds, then that law that they enact would override this more general law in 115D. So with the breakdown here showing state and local, those make up the majority of funds for colleges. And it is important to think about how does that break down. And so on the next slide, this gives you a picture of how the funding for community colleges breaks down. So in the far right side in green and purple, this pie graph is showing our current fiscal year 2021-22, we call our baseline budget, state aid baseline budget. This is the budget that colleges got from us and was approved at the August meeting of our State Board of Community Colleges. And this is the budget that we are able to operate under in the absence of that big state budget being approved. There's existing law that tells state of North Carolina how we are to operate and what budget amount we are to use when there is not an enacted 2-year budget. And so this is what we are operating under. And at the current time, you'll see that in green, most of our state funding that is allocated to colleges, almost 77%, comes from general fund appropriation. Again, what does that mean? That is the tax dollars that I referenced earlier. What is our share of those tax dollars? And earlier I mentioned last year was about $1.23 billion. In purple, in the purple slice, you see we have tuition and other receipts. Those are also considered state funds. Tuition represents 22%, and of the 22% of the 23, and the remaining is a federal grant called Career and Technical Education Perkins funds that gets allocated out to our 58 colleges. Those revenues are deposited with the state of North Carolina, with the state treasurer, and so therefore they are considered state funds. Although colleges collect tuition locally, students pay the college, and then those tuition dollars do get deposited in a bank under the name of the state treasurer, and those dollars are collected and held and credited for us as part of our state budget. And so those dollars are part of the funds that we allocate to colleges. And so with that being said, if you've heard about the fact that the state of North Carolina has a balanced budget requirement, and that is in our state's constitution, we are required to maintain a balanced budget. From the state perspective, we must have both of these pie slices, the big green pie and the smaller purple pie slices. We need to have all of those dollars to make up the funding that we've awarded or allocated to colleges. As I mentioned, the state board approved this budget in August. So, for example, if the tuition that colleges are collecting and depositing does not equal the amount that we have budgeted, if we're collecting less, then we are not going to have a balanced budget. Similarly, with the green part of the pie, if the state of North Carolina tax dollars, sales tax, income, or corporate, or any of those are not collected at the level that the General Assembly has budgeted, then we would not have a balanced budget at the state level, which would also impact our budget for colleges, since that does make up the biggest percentage. So those things are very important in ensuring that we in the community college system have a balanced budget at the state for our state funds. And we always have to be mindful of and be monitoring both of those parts of our budget. So when you take those state dollars, the appropriation and the tuition, and then you look at a college's operating budget, that college's operating budget, on average, 77% of that is going to be those state funds. And then 16% would be county funds, which you see there in red. And then lastly, institutional funds in the lighter green make up about 8%. And this is on average. Obviously, individual colleges may have more county funds or less county funds. This is looking at the average across all 58 colleges based on last fiscal year's data. The county funds, of course, is self-explanatory. What that is, the institutional funds, that's going to be pretty much everything else that your college uses for operations of the college that is not state funds or county funds, such as specific student fees that are charged to students, like the activity fee or a parking fee. It also would be specific grants that your college has applied for and received locally that does not come to your college from the state or from the system office. Or it could also be things like bookstore revenues and vending revenues and those types of things. So those are the three main funding sources that make up a community college operating budget. And again, the vast majority of 77% comes from those state funds. This gives you some history of the community college state budget over the past 10 or so years. And we've broken this down into receipts, which is mostly going to be the tuition, is going to be the tuition and the Perkins funds. In 2020-21, the last year shown here, the blue receipts also includes some federal dollars that became part of our budget for COVID relief. And those funds came to us from legislation for the 2021 budget in about May, June of 2020, where we received funds to allocate to colleges. And so those make up a larger blue bar there you see in 2021. You also see that our overall budget has grown over this time period, up to the very top of the graph at the 1.6, when you factor in the appropriation and the revenue stream that we get for tuition and those federal funds. The biggest factors that you see here listed are in why these numbers go up or go down is enrollment growth or enrollment decrease, as well as salary increases. Those are the major factors that may cause this to go up and down. But there are other factors, such as if we had a tuition rate increase in the budget, then the receipts bar would go up, for example. Here I'm showing you the budget per FTE for those same for the most recent time period, and you can see that that has also gone up, pretty large increase of in the appropriation portion. You can see about 1,000. It was at 3938 in 2012-13. And it's gone up to about 5,000 in last year in appropriation. And then the receipts amount per FTE has also gone up. Again, that number in 2020-21 is a little bit higher because of some of those one-time federal COVID funds that were included in our allocations to colleges last year. Now, I mentioned earlier that we took a budget to the state board in August, and we do have a law that requires that. State board does have to approve allocations to colleges from state and federal funds. Any of those funds that flow through us here at the system level must be approved by the state board under their policies and regulations. We typically take to the board the big budget allocations that we call the state aid allocations and budget policies document. Typically, that's about a 100-page document. We typically take that in August. Of course, this year we did not have that comprehensive budget, so we had a smaller baseline budget that we took in August. And if we get a budget, which all signs based on what the governor stated that he's going to sign, the budget that was released this week, then we would expect to have begin working on that bigger baseline, state aid budget policies document to take to the board. We expect to do that at their January meeting. In addition to that big budget that awards most funds to colleges, there are other times throughout the year, almost every month, in fact, we have some type of an item that comes to our state board for approval to award funds to colleges. And those are done separately because generally those are going to be on a competitive basis where a college has to apply for the funds or it's on a one-time special allocation basis. So an example of that would be career coach funding or male minority success. Those are awarded on a competitive basis where colleges have to apply for the funds. And so those are only awarded at certain times through our state board process. Now, in terms of the main budget that we mentioned, the state aid allocations to colleges, that is the vast majority of funding to colleges. Those allocations are broken up generally into these three categories: a base allocation, an FTE allocation, or a performance allocation. And you can see here what those mean. This gives you a visual picture of this year's baseline budget that we awarded, again, based on state board action at August 2021. And starting from left to right, the vast majority of funding that's awarded are allocated is instructional. 58% of those funds awarded were based on instruction. And you can see here in red, the large part of this instruction is based on FTE. Very small slice at the bottom in blue is based on a base amount where every college gets the same. Then moving to the right, the next biggest piece of our budget is institutional and academic support. That is your other state funded positions, everything from the president, finance, financial aid, HR, IT, student services, etc. Those types of areas of the college. You can see here that represents 34% of the funding allocations. And this is a different percentage that is FTE versus base. You can see the base makes up a larger proportional amount of this allocation. And then the FTE portion is still the largest, but the base for this is much larger than for instruction. Performance-based allocation, 24 million at 2%. This has been an item in the budget for a few years now. And that is based on performance of students. And then about 2% is something we call categorical allocations. These are allocations that are directed for specific purposes or to specific colleges for specific purposes. Some of these would be the small business center funding and also child care grant and other specific allocations that go to certain colleges. And then lastly, equipment and instructional resources is at about 4% of the allocations. Now touching on FTE. When we award allocations out to colleges, those that I showed on the previous slide, we are using, in most cases, what we call budget FTE. So it's important to understand what FTE is and budget FTE. So first, FTE. FTE is defined in our state board code, and it is defined as 1 FTE equals 512 student hours in membership. Now, we take that information, which we could also call actual FTE. How many actual student hours in membership were there? And how many actual FTEs does that mean, or does that equal? Every 512 equals 1 FTE. In this way, if we have many part-time students, which we do in the community college system, we can come up with a way to count them fairly in our calculations of FTE. So many part-time students may make up 1 FTE. Then we also need to be looking at what is our counting period? How do we count budget FTE? We look at summer, fall, and spring. And then lastly, we take this data, the FTE from summer, the FTE from fall, and then from spring. And we calculate budget FTE. And that is the higher of the most recent year's actual FTE or the average of the most recent 2 years actual FTE. And we look at this between 3 areas: curriculum. So we would calculate a college's budget FTE for curriculum. We will separately then calculate that college's budget FTE for continuing education. And then we will also separately calculate a college's budget FTE for basic skills. So those will be the 3 areas that we calculate. And so, for example, a college who has a growing Con Ed program where their most recent year's actual is highest, they could get their budget FTE funded on that. Whereas if their curriculum FTE is declining, then the average of the most recent 2 year would be higher. So we look at that for each college and for each of the 3 instructional areas. We then add up all of those numbers together to get each college's budget FTE, and then in total to the system level total budget FTE. Another important factor within the funding for community colleges is how our FTE is structured based on tiers. We have 4 tiers, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1B, and tier 1A. And why do we have 1A and 1B versus 1, 2, 3, 4? And that is because when tier funding was originally put in place, we only had 3 tiers. It was 1, 2, and 3. And then in the first year of Governor McCrory's administration, I worked for many, many years, about 16 and a half years in the Office of State Budget Management. And when I worked in that role in his first year, he proposed, and it was included in the budget that year, breaking up tier 1 into tier 1A. And there was additional funding put in the budget for that. And so tier 1A was determined looking at courses that lead to immediate employment in high priority, high demand occupations that lead to higher wages in North Carolina. So that was really put in as an incentive to help address those areas of the state in terms of economic need. Then tier 1B is all other health and technical and lab-based courses and college math. Tier 2 is all your other curriculum courses and Con Ed courses leading to the third-party credential. And then tier 3 is all your other Con Ed courses and basic skills. So based on these tiers, we have different funding rates for instruction. You can see here on this chart, budget FTE in tier 1A are going to receive $4,449.55 for instruction. And tier 1B, $39.36, and then so on. The institutional and academic support, this allocation is for those non-instructional areas of the college that I mentioned earlier, such as HR, student services, financial aid, etc. These are funded for budget FTE greater than 750. So for example, if a college had 1,000 budget FTE, then we would subtract 750 from that, which would be 250. So for each of those, you would receive 1,668. And that is to support additional staffing needs to support those student enrollment growth. Why is this only for budget FTE greater than 750? That is because of the base. So here, showing base amounts for colleges. Looking first, jumping down to the institutional and academic support. That was in the graph several slides ago. That was much larger than for the instruction. And so you can see almost $2.5 million each college gets the same amount of a base for institutional academic support. And that represents the first 750 budget FTE at a college. So a college that has 750 FTE or less budget FTE would still get this $2.5 million base. A college that has more than that is going to get this 1,688 for every individual budget FTE above that 750 level. And then going back to the base, you see curriculum and Con Ed instruction each have a small base amount that is represented here. These base amounts and really all of these formulas have been developed based on historically over time. And so through time, someone determined these formulas or tweak the formulas. For example, the tiered funding didn't always used to be in place, but it was added as a part of a change to our formulas a number of years ago through legislation and through a committee and work of the system in coming up with that change to the formula. So that really would be how things get added or changed in these formulas, would be based on legislation and recommendations from the system, and certainly with much input and discussion from colleges. Two last slides I wanted to share with you today. One is about budget flexibility. So something that is unique in the community college system is called budget flexibility. The General Assembly historically has allowed and has allowed in actual law that our colleges have some flexibility with these formulas and with these funds. Formulas are for allocation purposes. And so colleges have flexibility in how they're spending those dollars, although there are some exceptions to that rule. And again, this is actually in legislation, in General Statute 115D. So the exceptions are basic skills. So basic skills funding is restricted and must be used for basic skills programs only. And that includes your state and your federal basic skills funds if you receive the federal funds. Federal Perkins also is restricted. And again, that's a federal program. So you can't just take those funds and use it for something else. It has to be consistent with the program requirements. And so that is restricted. Customized training, those funds, again, those are restricted. Those have to be used for the specific customized training program. And then lastly, certain other allocations approved by the state board outside that annual budget package. I mentioned earlier, an example of that would be career coaches or minority success initiative. Those items are approved for specific purposes. But the other areas, curriculum, continuing education, and institutional and academic support, those three, for example, can be used flexibly within the budget. So if a college needs to spend more in continuing education, or more in curriculum, or more in institutional support, you can use monies from the other formulas, transfer those to spend in the other area of the budget. So that is a very large amount of flexibility. In the K-12 side of the budget, there is some flexibility, but definitely not as much as this. So our community colleges do have more flexibility than public schools, and definitely substantially more than we have here at the system office as a state agency. We have very limited, almost no flexibility. So that is a big plus for colleges. And then lastly, these are things that we occasionally get questions about. And so I had created this slide about topics or terminologies or things that you may hear about generally. So one is reversions and spending freezes. So when we do not have a balanced budget, I talked about this earlier at the state level, with the tax dollars that the state has to collect to have a balanced budget, which we have to by law, by Constitution, then we will have circumstances typically that could be reversions or spending freezes. So a reversion would be if the governor determines there will be a shortfall at the state revenue level, and that would require agencies to revert funds. What does that really mean? What that means is we would have to basically cut back on our budgets spending. So if we had allocated a certain amount to colleges and we're told we have to revert back 2%, for example, then colleges would have to cut spending their budget, their state portion of their budget, by 2%. And then Spending freezes is another situation where we have definitely had this historically when we've had revenue shortfalls, such as travel freezes, hiring freezes, and purchasing freezes or restrictions. Another area could be when we have a problem at the state level would be tuition shortfall. If we are not collecting tuition at the level that it is budgeted, then that means we do not have a balanced budget that we've allocated to colleges. And so in those cases, we issue a budget callback and require colleges to reduce their budgets according to the amount that we are estimating that we will not collect in tuition. And then tuition increases. So by law, we cannot increase tuition inconsistent with legislation. And so historically within the community college system, our tuition would increase when the General Assembly and governor propose, and that would have to be enacted into law in a budget that directs that our tuition rates go up. And those have happened historically, typically in two scenarios. One is at the state level when there are revenue shortfalls at the state level, and a method to balance the budget is to increase tuition. And then another circumstance could be if there's new programs or a new program and they're looking for revenue sources to help fund the new programs within the community. These would only be within the community college system, of course. Then tuition could be increases to help cover the cost of funding a new program. So those are hopefully giving you some good background information about the budget and how the budget works, and at a high level, FTE and budget FTE. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We appreciate that presentation. Feel free to put any questions that you might have in the chat box, or feel free to unmute your microphone and give Elizabeth your challenging questions for the afternoon. While people are thinking, Elizabeth, one thought just a kind of a general question. I was trying to remember the last time I recall that there was a tuition increase. It's been a very long time, hasn't it?
That's right. It has. We have not, since I've been here, which is now just a little over 5 years, 5 years and 17 days, we have not had a tuition increase. Yeah. So I think it was about the year prior to my arriving was the last time. So that's been a good thing. And I know there's been differences of opinion, but generally a number of the presidents have expressed that they do not have a desire to have a tuition increase.
Yes, thank you. We do have one question in the chat box, and it reads, I'm coming from another state. Do North Carolina colleges have a set amount of tuition waivers that can be used for special programs?
Oh, okay. So a good question there. So we do not have a set amount of tuition waivers, but what we do have is in our law, in our state law, we do have a number of legal tuition waivers that we give for students for various programs. And I was trying to pull up, I could actually pull up here. We have to report on that. A few years ago, the legislature required us to begin reporting on that to them. Here we go. And we usually take that report to the state board in January. So I'm gonna just share that. Are you seeing that? Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is the report we issued. We have to send it to the General Assembly by February 1 each year. And so our state board approved this at their January meeting. And this is on our website. This shows, this is probably the best slide to show right here. This gives you a picture of all of the different tuition waivers. This was for 2019, 2020. And you can see the various categories of tuition waivers for students. And the dollar amount, you can see $111.8 million worth of waivers. The biggest one is high school students with the program we call Career and College Promise. Students, high school students, of course, generally that's referred to as dual enrollment, but we do have very specific criteria and requirements for Career and College Promise in North Carolina. That by far is the largest area. Law enforcement and fire department, volunteer, and fire department, municipal, county, and state. Those are the other big areas as well. So this is the breakdown, but we reference here the authorizations for these. These are authorized. Some of these are authorized in General Statute 115D-5 and others in General Statute 115B-2.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Cindy, for that question. Any other questions for Elizabeth? So we have a question here from Christy. It says, I used to hear a lot about equipment funds as separate monies. Are those considered instructional funds that can be reallocated to different areas?
So equipment funds that we allocate to colleges, those are not necessarily considered instructional funds, but those are dollars that colleges have flexibility with. When I mentioned earlier in my presentation about budget flexibility, that colleges have flexibility to use those dollars for various other uses if needed. Instead of using it for equipment, it could be used for curriculum. It has to be within an approved, within an allowable category. Again, for example, if colleges needed more funds one year for curriculum, you could use some of those dollars. Now, again, we always want to caution everyone to think about how you're doing those transfers, because what we don't want to have happen is the General Assembly to say, well, colleges are just transferring equipment dollars for other purposes and they're not using it for equipment. And then if we go ask for more money for equipment, that will not be a good picture to be able to tell the General Assembly to say, oh, well, we gave you 50 million in your budget for equipment, but colleges, spent 10 million of it on something else. So it is a trade-off there. You do have that flexibility, but we do want to have colleges think carefully about that. And then vice versa, I'll say too, you could also, if you didn't need all of the curriculum dollars, again, I'm just using that as an example, or institutional support, and for whatever reason you have a particular need in equipment that's more than your budget in one given year, but you're not going to use all of your curriculum or one of your other formulas that has flexibility, you could transfer money into equipment and spend a little bit more in that year.
All right, thank you. Great question, Christy. Any other questions? Not hearing any. Feel free to unmute your microphone or to put it in the chat. We'll pause just a few more seconds to see if there's any more questions. Well, I want to give a special thank you to Elizabeth. The President's Association was meeting over at RTP this afternoon, and the police escort that Elizabeth received to get over here to the system office. Okay, no police escort, but she did have to make it a yeoman's effort to make it here in time to do the presentation today. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. We appreciate that. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Elizabeth or anybody on her team, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Thank you, Elizabeth.
I hope you have a good rest of your session.
No problem. And so we'll take a little break here, everybody, and we will hopefully be able to meet with and hear from President Stith here in about 10 minutes or so. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the honor of introducing Thomas A. Stith III, who became the 10th president of the North Carolina Community College System on January 11th, 2021. Prior to his selection, he was district director of the U.S. Small Business Administration, where he led the federal agency's $16 billion response to the COVID-19 in North Carolina. Stith served as chief of staff to former Governor Pat McCrory and was a 3-term city council member in Durham. Stith has extensive experience in both private and public sector executive roles during his professional career. Stith holds a bachelor's degree in management and an MBA in marketing from North Carolina Central University. He has served on boards of Golden Leaf Foundation and the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership, the United Way of the Greater Triangle, North Carolina Leadership Forum member, and is a deacon at Union Baptist Church. He and his wife Yolanda have 3 daughters, Kara, Kaya, and Kira. I think I pronounced them right, President Stith.
You are close. I'll give you an A for effort.
Oh, I tried. I apologize.
No, it was very close. Yeah, the
Without-
challenge is when they're all in the house together and you're trying to call one and you use the other name. I just usually say, you know who I'm talking to.
Yes, sir. Well, the mic is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, JW, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and thanks for accommodating me. I has spent all day with our wonderful 58 presidents. Today was the statewide presidents meeting out held at Wake Tech's RTP campus. So literally just left them and glad that we were able to arrange the schedule for me just to speak to you a few minutes today. I thought I'd go since kind of the latter part of the day and thought maybe a few slides would keep folks awake, at least help keep me awake too. So JW, I think you're gonna drive for me. And yeah, so let's just go to, I just wanna talk a little bit about the state budget. And we are literally in the final hours with a very long process. And let me just say first and foremost that I'm extremely excited about where the community college has landed with the budget, although I believe the Senate made their final vote today. We'll have final vote from the House. The governor has said in comments on yesterday that he will be signing the budget. So I think we are very close to having a state budget. Next slide, please. And what I want to do is just review a few of the items that will benefit the community college system. And I'm just going to say, I'm, as I said, very excited about it. You know, as my hair grays and thins to nothing, I think more and more what my father used to say. And he said, son, you know, sometimes you have to stop and smell the roses, which he never did. He was from Eastern North Carolina, and they believed in 20-hour work days and continuing to push forward. And sort of from that same stock. But I want us to pause because as a community college family, this was a unified effort. As I just told the presidents today, today's budget, which candidly is the highest percentage increase in our budget in almost 10 years. We didn't look back farther than that. It was a unified effort of our system office staff, our presidents, our trustees and stakeholders throughout the state coming together and with one voice to let our legislative and executive leaders in the state know the critical needs of our community college system. So I thought it would be helpful just to, as I said, we're still in the final stages of the last votes on the budget. We anticipate no later than Friday. So within the next 24, 48 hours, the state will actually have a budget. I know we've gone a session or so without one, but we did within this budget, our legislative agenda had made a request for a minimum of a 5% increase for our faculty and staff salaries. This budget has a 5% increase over the biennium for faculty and staff. In addition to that, those individuals making less than $75,000 will get a one-time $1,500 bonus. Those over $75,000 will get a one-time $1,000 bonus. We had asked for stabilization funds. As we all know, we continue to work through the challenges of the impact of the global pandemic. And we actually asked for $60 million in budget stabilization funding for our 58 community colleges, knowing that while there's significant federal funding, we're not sure fully now, as no one is, of the impact of COVID-19. And so the legislature fully funded the budget stabilization. We asked really for 96, 97% stabilization fund. They funded it 100%, so $80 million in this current budget. We did get established for the first time in the community college system, a recruitment and retention fund for community college faculty. First year of the biennium, 8.6 million, and goes to 12.3 million in the second year. And these are recurring funds. So this will be an initiative, and we were given the flexibility to design it here at the system office to develop a recruitment and retention fund that is critically needed now. As you look at today's market, whether it's retaining the excellent faculty staff that we have in our community college system, we know it's a very competitive market now. We are in the midst of the continuation of our IT modernization to provide a ERP system that is efficient and effective for all our 58 community colleges. Receive full funding for that. That amount was $28.5 million. During about halfway or a third of the way through the legislative session, once again, we had an attack on one of our colleges from ransomware folks. Bad actors will continue to exist in cyberspace. So we added to our legislative agenda 9 positions, permanent positions, to assist our colleges in developing a system that would harden our colleges. So that was fully funded. We also identified capital needs at the beginning of the legislative session. And we see in this budget, $400 million over 4 years, so $100 million a year toward capital needs for our community colleges. And then there were additional capital projects for specific colleges. But overall, in addition to that, we have $100 million per year over the next 4 years for capital improvements. Next slide, please. And so as we move forward, as I said, I just wanted to take time to highlight the state budget that is getting ready to pass. Want to give you an idea from a system perspective. Our state board is now focusing on our next strategic plan. Dr. Patrick Crane, our vice president for strategy and innovation, is leading that effort for the state board. And it's going to be a very comprehensive effort. We've scheduled, or in the process of scheduling, 8 regional meetings across the state to ensure that we get input from our presidents, our faculty, our trustees, numerous stakeholders within our communities. We also will participate in some of the regional presidential meetings that are structured through the president's organization. So this, our plan is in the spring of 2022 to have a new strategic plan for the community college system as we continue to ensure that we're flexible in meeting the needs of our students. Next slide. Now, as JW mentioned, I'm the 10th president of the community college system. I just saw it as a North Carolina native. It was just a blessing to join the system in January 11th of this year. I will say it seems a little longer than January, not quite a year, but I say that in good nature. It's been a very welcoming transition, not only folks here at the system office, but colleges across the state. And that's one thing you recognize. It's the passion of the people that are engaged with the community college system is consistent across the state. So when as I went through the review process and after my selection, as I told the state board that I would base my vision on 3 pillars. First, and all important, but first, that the North Carolina Community College system would be the first choice for accessible and affordable education in North Carolina. I'm a product of the university system here in North Carolina, but I firmly believe, in particular at this time in our state's history, that the community college system will lead in our educational higher education. We've already solved the affordability. We're extremely competitive from a cost perspective, and we're accessible. Our founding father, Dallas Herring, believed in the open door of the community college system. So we need to continue to establish ourselves as that first choice, whether it's a newly minted high school student pursuing an associate's, or a displaced worker, or an adult learner that's pivoting to a new career. I firmly believe that the community college system should be their first choice for higher education. With that, not only as we recover from this pandemic, but as we move forward into the future, that we will be a key leading institution for our economic recovery and sustained growth in the future. And as I mentioned, I'm a North Carolina native, and I realize that from the mountains to the coast, the strength of our state is the diversity of the people in North Carolina, our diverse backgrounds, our diverse skills, and we'll use that to become a national model for diversity and inclusion. That's our competitive advantage in North Carolina. That's why we have companies like Google or Pratt & Whitney or Apple coming and locating to North Carolina, and the numerous businesses that are already here and expanding. So the strategic planning process will build upon these 3 pillars. Next slide. One of the areas I talked with our state board about recently, and as I know we're all focused on, and that's growing our enrollment. We, like community colleges across the country, were impacted by the pandemic, but it is a trend that we have seen, not just during this COVID year and a half. We've been experiencing a decline in enrollment. Next slide. That has taken place. We did a 10-year look, and over the last 10 years, you've seen a 27% decrease in our enrollment. So our board and our leadership team and colleagues here at the system office are very keenly aware that we need to focus on those strategies that will increase our enrollment. On the next slide, you'll see that depending on the area, curriculum down about 5%, workforce 19%, and significant reduction. And this was 2019 through 2021, as you see by the graph, around 42%. We disaggregated the numbers even farther. Next slide, please. And it shows significant impact, in particular in our minority males, Hispanic males down 22%, African-American males down 31%. So as we develop our strategy to increase our overall enrollment, we'll certainly look at strategies to address these significant areas of enrollment decline. On next slide. I will say that very optimistically that the fall enrollment is showing a slight increase. Institutional growth is up about 3%. Overall enrollment, and these are preliminary numbers, are up about 1%. So we certainly intend to continue that trend as we move into our spring semester. Next slide. Some of the strategies that are already in place and some of the newer initiatives we are engaging, and I'll just pick a few of these. The Adult Learner Pilot Program, that's a collaborative with the Belk Endowment My Future NC and the community college system you see here, 6 colleges that are participating in an adult learner pilot to ensure that we're implementing strategies that provide opportunity for our adult learners to engage. The REACH initiative is being led by Dr. Crane. It was $800,000 grant recently received from the Lumina and the Belk Endowment to focus on credentials in high demand areas of employment for adult credentials, and specifically for those learners of color. So we have several pilot initiatives moving forward now. We have ongoing our strategic enrollment teams. We have also enhanced our partnerships around financial support. The Golden Leaf Foundation increased their scholarship initiative with the community college this year. The governor utilized federal funding for the Longleaf Commitment. That provided an opportunity, and now it has been expanded. Initially, it was for our 2021 high school graduates, has recently been expanded to our 2020 high school graduates as well that have not entered college. In many cases, that grant will pay for tuition and fees. So we have several financial support mechanisms to ensure that that is not a barrier for entry into our community colleges. Next slide. And as we mentioned, while we are focusing on increasing enrollment, we need to ensure that we are retaining our students as well. So here you'll see several initiatives that are in place, in particular Bertha and Single Stop, to ensure that we are providing those services and wraparound services that our students need. We realize the value of our career coaches in helping guiding our students once we get them on campus. Our minority male initiative, and I believe a new cohort or grant cycle is opening for that as well. So while we are focusing obviously on increasing enrollment, these are some of the strategies that we're implementing to ensure that we retain students as well. Next slide. I always like to show this slide to remind people that we are the Great 58. And if I slip and name one college, I want to make sure that I can say I've named all 58 in any presentation. But I think it's also always good to remember that we're the 3rd largest system in the country. If you look at investing in our students, it translates into student success. We looked at data from 2009 to 19. Those 33% of those students were wage earners in North Carolina in 2020. That equated to 1.7 million people, over $60 billion in earnings. And our graduates, 3 years after graduation, 77% of those graduates are in North Carolina. So it's not only investment in our educational system in North Carolina. When you invest in the community college system, it's an investment in the economy of the state of North Carolina. Next slide. Again, I just want to reemphasize, and these obviously are a cohort of our nurses, that ultimately, why do we get up each morning? We are focusing on our students, ensuring that we have an environment that provides for student success. And again, as I continue to travel across the state of North Carolina, the passion, the commitment of the individuals involved with the community college system, our faculty, our staff, our presidents, that passion is unwavering, and it is focused on our success for our students. Next slide. I think that's a concluding slide. So JW is certainly, thank you all for allowing me a few moments on your schedule this afternoon. I don't know if there's 1 or 2 quick questions. I don't want to prolong your program, or no time for that. I will sign off.
I think we have time for a few questions if anybody has some. Thank you, President Stith, but we'll take a second here to see if anybody wants to put a question either in the chat or unmute your microphone and ask. It's been kind of a quiet bunch today, sir.
All right. Yeah, that's been the mood today. So quiet is okay. They're reflective.
Well, thank you, sir. I
All right.
appreciate your time, and I appreciate you, your vision and your leadership with us. Thank you very much. And I see Dr. Gold has come on. Did you have any comments as well, Dr. Gold?
Just want to take a moment to say hello and say how much I appreciate everyone being part of the new Chiefs orientation, and also say congratulations to all those who are in those roles. I'm looking at the names on the squares here, and I recognize many of them. So I know that for many of these individuals, they've been around for quite some time, just in different roles and different responsibilities. But just wanted to reiterate that we're here to support you and help you. And I know I've talked to several of you over the past year or so, or a few months, and as you've had questions, but always happy for you to reach out. We're here to support you and what you're doing on the local campuses, and the numbers that President Stish shared would not be possible without your hard work. So just proud to be part of the work that you do on your campuses.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate it. And we thank you for your time and for your leadership.
Thank you. You all have a good day.
At this time, we'll not even pause. We'll just keep things moving. Dr. Matt Meyer has pulled together a panel, and I think I've got all the right people made co-hosts. And we can go ahead and begin with your panel, Matt.
Yeah, so we're going to go fast. I'm not even going to introduce them. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and then jump right into their presentations. But I did think we would start with Caroline, followed by Emily, and to finish off with Layla. Okay, so Caroline, I have your presentation. Emily and Layla, you'll be able to share your screens when you're up. And so Caroline, you want to jump in?
Yep. Thanks, Matt, and thank y'all for having me here today. I'm going to talk really fast because I'm going to get all this done in my allotted time. You can advance the slide. I'm Caroline Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Business Committee for Education. We're the education nonprofit in the governor's office. We've been around for like 35 years. Our board is made up of business leaders from across the state, and we focus on work-based learning, all the way from middle school, all the way up into community college, professional development for K-12 educators. And in the last year and a half, we've been focused on connectivity for students for remote learning, which has transitioned into supporting closing the digital divide among our K-12 students. Matt wanted me to talk about a couple of initiatives that we work closely with Matt and the team, the community college system. Y'all have got great leaders at the state level, innovative people, and they're doing fantastic things for North Carolinians all over the state. First thing I'm going to talk about is Career Launch. This program came out of the National Governors Association Policy Academy to expand work-based learning. This was a multi-system effort. Matt represented the college system, but we also had Elizabeth Standifer for youth apprenticeship, and we worked with leaders from DPI, Commerce Leads, the governor's workforce advisor, the governor's education advisor, NC Works, and the Division of Workforce Solutions. What we're trying to do in this initiative is highlight high quality work-based learning, like at the end of this work-based learning spectrum. And in the community college system, what we're talking about is youth apprenticeships and registered apprenticeships. So we came together and have this vision statement that you can read. And again, Career Launch programs, that high level, robust work-based learning. And you can read what all of the qualifications are. Go ahead and advance the slide. We look at work-based learning in a continuum. We've been involved in this work with Matt and partners from all of the agencies for going on 5 years now, and have agreed in the terminology for work-based learning, what the definition of work-based learning is, and how it is important to the state, and what we're talking about when we're talking about Career Launch, these high-level work-based learning programs. I think a lot of times people will say work-based learning, what they really mean is career awareness, which is great. We have that in our continuum, but we're talking about this very high-level work-based learning. Next slide. And how you can advance. Thank you. I take a digression now in my presentation to share with you some slides that Matt and I worked in together. I don't know how aware y'all are of all of these state initiatives that are going on now, but there are a lot of them. And Matt did a great job in sort of taking the multitude of initiatives. I call them the initiative Orama slides, and there are 3 of them that you'll see in a second. What we're looking at with these statewide initiatives is putting them into 3 sorts of buckets of what the focus is and what they're trying to do. Go ahead and advance. You can advance kind of quickly to the next 3 slides. But as you can see, there are a lot of initiatives that involve work-based learning. There are 3 pages of initiatives that involve work-based learning. As you can see by the logos, there's a lot of cross-pollination. What we're trying to do with Career Launch too is sort of put our hands around everything so we can make sure that everybody is talking to one another, and that we're giving really clear information for students and parents and employers. As I get back to the Career Launch, what we're going to do on December the 9th, excuse me, is have the Career Launch launch, or the big NCBCE meeting that is going to be focusing on Career Launch programs. We're also going to launch a site. And I'd love for y'all to register for the conference. We'll give you information on the next slide, but also keep in touch with me about how we can use this site to be helpful to y'all in messaging high quality work-based learning to your students, professors, business partners. Go ahead and advance the slide. What we're going to do, and this is like a little mini site, it's going to connect to the system sites. But what we found is, especially in messaging to young people, a lot of the bureaucratic sites are cumbersome and confusing and not very inspirational, because they're meant to be these big informational sites. They have to do a lot of things. So we're developing a fun, easy to digest little site for students, parents, and employers around the state. We're going to go through all of the paths. So all of the youth apprenticeships, all of the CTE pathways, all of these robust work-based learning pathways, and help the students understand you take these classes, you do this much work-based learning, and this is what you end up with from a degree, a credential, or an experience. Go ahead and do the last slide. We're also going to put in video content of apprentices, CTE concentrators, getting the voice of the student, which is going to be much more helpful messaging to other students about the importance of getting involved in these programs. Next slide. All of these programs are going to connect back to the sites of the system offices. So all of the youth apprenticeship programs will go to Apprenticeship NC site. This Career Launch site is more just to give students sort of the taste of what these work-based learning programs are about, right? Just a little messaging. That's the invitation. Please, everybody join. It's going to be fun, an hour and a half long. We're doing it as a news show, and it is a nightmare getting together. So I really want everybody to join, because it's been hard. I'm in Charlotte now. I was in Surrey County yesterday. I'm going to McDowell tomorrow, talking to great community college presidents. Got Dr. Merritt on tomorrow, and great programs. Next slide. Now I'm going to even go quicker through the Navigator. The Navigator is the work-based learning marketplace that NCBCE launched 3 years ago in partnership with Fidelity Investments. We have the new Navigator. V3 is going to be coming to you in January 2022. Next slide. The Navigator is just sort of a match.com for work-based learning, where educators can look for work-based learning opportunities for their students, and businesses and employers can post work-based learning opportunities. Now, I'm going to tell you all the truth. When we built this thing, we built it for all of the systems. K-12 kind of came in quicker on what they wanted with the Navigator. So right now, there are a lot more resources for K-12 than for community college. but especially with the new development of the Navigator, there is an easy opportunity for the colleges to get involved in the Navigator, to be able to count work-based learning experiences, and to be able to help employers sort of grow their pipeline. Also, colleges, I keep asking people to do it. Nobody's taken the bait yet. This is a great way for colleges to message to students in K-12, right? To put on resources about, look at this program we have. This is a video of a program that we have. These are some career awareness programs we have. These are events that we have at the college for students. Think about the Navigator as you looking for work-based learning experiences for your students, but also think about the colleges as work-based learning resources as well. This is just how the Navigator, this is what the Navigator looks like. As you said, as I said, it's easy for teachers to look for types of work-based learning experiences they can select by career cluster, by geography. Next slide. The new Navigator is going to have a map function, which is going to make it easier for them to figure out things that are near their communities or not. We've got a ton of virtual resources in here as well. We're also got scheduling functionality in the new Navigator, and we're going to have the ability in the Navigator for educators to request work-based learning experiences and resources. These are the reporting systems, so employers can figure out like how many engagements did they do in schools, what schools were they, what kinds of engagements were they. We don't collect student data, but we collect grades and sex. So next slide. So get on the Navigator, wblnavigator.org. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the Tech Council. Next slide. NCVCE is pretty tech heavy from a membership organization. Chair of our board is actually with Google, and we've got pretty much all of them as members of NCVCE. So what we're doing with the Tech Council is to get a list of industry developed curriculum that results in credentials and certifications that are recognized by the industry. This is harder than you think to do, but we're doing it. So right now we're in the process of getting all of these credentials. So think through like all 3 cloud certifications, Google, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. Everything from a basic Swift coding and Apple all the way up to higher level architects. So pretty much we've asked the tech companies to give us everything that they have. We're putting it in a template like this so that students can be able to access these credentials in a way that makes sense. We found actually just through doing this work that even on the company sites, they're confusing. So we're doing all this work for you. Next slide. All of this information, at least from this first round of employers, is going to be available on the NCVCE website at the end of the year. K-12 is going to take some of these credentials and put them on a special part of their website so students from across the state can access them as well. I'm happy to share them with any of y'all and with workforce boards. We just want this work that we've done to get out into the community. And I think it's just Matt and I talk about as a lot of these companies come into the state and want students and adults to have some experience and get some of the credentials that are very specific to them. This is just an easy way for us to get that out to everybody. Thanks.
Excellent, Caroline. Stick around for questions at the end. Emily, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
You can see my screen, right? I have to say that it's part of the Zoom bingo. So I'm Emily Ganji, and I'm really excited to be with you all this afternoon. You are my people. I spent 10 years in the community college system, 8 years at Western Piedmont Community College in Burke County, and 2 years at the system office, working with Matt and JW and some other folks when Scott Rawls was president. So I was once a chief student development officer for 5 years, and I was an interim chief academic officer for almost a year. So you are my people, and I'm excited to be with you. I'm going to talk to you today about an effort that the NC Impact Initiative at the UNC School of Government is collaborating with My Future NC on, that has statewide implications for increasing post-secondary attainment in our state. So in 2018, President Spellings, who was president of the UNC system at the time, appointed the My Future NC Commission to set a statewide educational attainment goal for our state. Because based on some of these data points that you see here, the research was indicating that 67% of jobs were requiring a post-secondary credential, and that only half of North Carolinians of prime working age had such a credential. And meanwhile, we were hearing from employers, predominantly through the employer survey that the Department of Commerce administers periodically, that about half of them couldn't find the level of talent that they needed for positions for which they were hiring. So our team provided subject matter expertise to the commission, particularly the workforce subcommittee. And as part of that work, we produced a report called Bright Spots in partnership with Education North Carolina to highlight 10 communities who were pursuing efforts to increase post-secondary attainment at the local level. And we did that because we were making the point to the commissioners and policymakers that while the state can set a goal, it'll only be achieved at the local level. That at the state level, we can only do so much, but it's really up to folks like you at the local level to make progress happen. So we took nominations. We had 40 local places nominated to be featured, and we selected 10 to reflect the geographic diversity of our state and also to look at different kinds of models. And the key takeaways that we learned from those case studies were that one, in every local place there was a marketing challenge. There's an information challenge that I'm sure you're all aware of about what's available, and making sure that people who need to access the programs and services and credentials that we make available, making sure they know what's out there. Communities are also wrestling to align all the different priorities and curricula and measurements and accountability that we're all subject to as part of the educational pipeline. In every case, there was somebody who we referred to as the keeper of the torch, who's the person who's the glue that holds everything together and keeps the effort moving forward and keeps everybody engaged. And we found that person to be really important. We also found that in every instance, there was strong involvement from employers and the business community. They had to be engaged and supportive, not just as employers, but in helping with design and services to get the talent that they need. And it was also clear that there have to be multiple on and off ramps, multiple pathways for people to come into and come back into our education system. And the outcomes data are a real challenge for folks with doing this work at the local level. So the statewide commission established a goal that by 2030, the state will have 2 million adults ages 25 to 44 with a high quality credential or post-secondary degree. And it was adopted by the legislature, and it's got the support of the governor and the State Board of Community Colleges and all the major players. But when we set that goal, we knew that based on where we were and the projections leading up to 2030, that if things stayed on the status quo, we were going to fall short by about 400,000 adults of meeting that goal. And then the most recent data that we have from 2019 shows that we are running behind. And for 2019, we were about 44,000 adults behind where we need to be on our trajectory to accomplishing the goal. So our folks at the School of Government with the NC Impact Initiative collaborated with My Future NC and the team there and with the John M. Belk Endowment to create a program to support more local collaboratives around the state in designing local strategies to increase post-secondary attainment in their local community so that we can achieve our statewide goal as a whole. So you'll see here a map of the 15 collaboratives that we selected. From scanning the Brady Bunch boxes while other folks were talking, I know that some of you may be involved in some of these collaboratives. So if you are, here's your chance to show your pride and shout out in the chat box. Let folks know which collaborative you're a part of in case they want to get up with you for more information. Or you may see your community on here and think, I don't know enough about what they're doing. I need to get plugged in. And if that's the case, let me know that too, and I'll be glad to help you connect. We had an open call for proposals for folks to participate in this initial cohort. We received more than 40 applications that represented 82 counties in our state. So we were really excited about the level of interest and the demand for being part of these efforts, but it also made it really difficult to only choose 15 because of the high quality applications that we received. And we're grateful to some external reviewers who helped us review those proposals and helped us make selection, including folks from the community college system. So we've got a steering committee, of which I'm a part, with folks from the School of Government and My Future NC. We've even got somebody from Duke University to show that collaboration is possible with people that you wouldn't normally collaborate with if you're from UNC, as well as folks from the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. And as I mentioned, the Belk Endowment was provided the first large amount of funding to get this program started, but the Dogwood Health Trust in Western North Carolina got on board and is supporting collaboratives in Western North Carolina as well, so that we were able to serve 15 communities instead of 10 as we originally planned. So over the course of 18 months, we're going to work with these 15 collaboratives to help them design strategies for increasing post-secondary attainment in their community, and to help them with capacity building to put their collaborative together or to strengthen an existing collaborative that they have. And we're going to share what they learned and what we learned from them statewide with all of you and everybody who's interested, so that what they pilot and what they learn can be replicated or emulated in other parts of the state, or that we can learn about what didn't work as well, so that other folks won't spend time investing on strategies that don't have good outcomes. We're also helping with identifying funding to help in sustaining their work. So we're gathering folks together for 5 forums throughout the process, where all the 15 teams come together, in addition to webinars and their monthly meetings in their community. And at our most recent forum a couple weeks ago, we had folks from the Pandemic Recovery Office speak about all the pandemic recovery funding that's come to the state and how some of those sources would be beneficial to some of the efforts in these communities that were eligible for the different purposes of those grants. So each community is leveraging their existing assets and activities and has made a commitment to increase their educational attainment. And equally important to those of us working on this effort is that they're also working to increase the equity in their attainment. So, you know, based even on the graph that President Stith showed earlier about community college enrollment, we know that we don't have equity in who's attaining credentials in our state and who is enrolled in our colleges. And so it is important to disaggregate our data and to look at the inequities that we have and make sure we design strategies designed to overcome those inequities. So the funds that we're providing to each collaborative, the bulk of those are used to pay for a project manager to support the work. I mentioned earlier the importance of that person who's the keeper of the torch. So we're trying to provide that backbone person to organize the collaborative and to keep everybody moving in the same direction. And we know that that role is critical. We're grateful for those people. So we've got a website where we share various resources, but a few that I wanted to point out to you today. We recently shared a national scan of post-secondary attainment practices. So we've got practices from around the nation that are all evidence-based and have been proven to increase educational attainment in those communities. We intentionally picked communities that look very different in terms of their population and demographics and their size, whether they're urban, rural, or suburban, and their practices particular to adult learners as well as K-12, workforce-led versus education-led. So there are a host of resources in there. One I particularly want to point out to you that a lot of our collaboratives have been interested in is the Credit for Prior Learning Guide that came from another state that's doing really good work. They created a Credit for Prior Learning wizard. And so I know there's a lot of work happening in North Carolina to work on credit for prior learning. And so I recommend that practice to you and checking that out in particular. And then My Future NC recently issued their annual report of where we are, and especially about how the pandemic has hurt our efforts, like so many things in our state, in terms of increasing post-secondary attainment and the barriers that it's creating for folks enrolling and remaining and completing their educational goals. And then there's also a link to the Bright Spots report that I mentioned. And some of you may have communities who are described in that first report. So I'll drop all these links in the chat box as well after we finish the presentation. And then as part of this project, My Future NC has hired 4 regional impact managers who are working with the 15 collaboratives that I've shared with you earlier, but they're also working in these large regions of our state to support other communities as well. So if you want to reach out to them, to the person who's working in your region, to see how they can help you in your local efforts to increase post-secondary attainment, or if you're interested in participating in a future cohort of this project, then please reach out to them. They're all nice folks and they'd be glad to hear from you. And then of course I had to give you our social media handles so you can follow along with the project online as well. So I'll turn it over to Layla.
Layla, you ready?
I am ready. I'm going to pull up my screen. Okay, so if you can't see my screen, let me know. I'm
See
assuming
it.
that
It's
it,
good.
awesome, great. Well, I'm so excited to share with y'all today about Finish First NC. I'm Layla Shahidel, the project director for Wake Tech's Finish First NC initiative. I'm a proud native North Carolinian. I hail from Pitt County. I've been in Raleigh for about 20 years, at Wake Tech for about 5.5 years, and working on the Finish First NC initiative for about 2.5 years. So I'm not sure how many of y'all have heard of Finish First NC and how many have not. So I'm glad to share with y'all about it and also share some impacts that we're seeing. Are our students more successful than we realize? This is in many ways a question that was the beginning of Finish First NC. It was one that came out of a meeting between Brian Ryan, who is Wake Tech's SVP of Effectiveness and Innovation, and Dr. Kai Wong, who is our Senior Dean of Strategic Innovations. And they created Finish First NC, but it started by them asking this question, and they were in particular interested in how many of our students are close to completing any credential. And so they developed an algorithm that matched up every student against every credential to help us identify how many of those students were very close to completion. And what they found was not only were there a lot of our students who were close to completing a credential, some of those were not credentials that they had declared as their program of study, but there were also these other students who had already fulfilled the requirements for attaining the credential, but simply had not received the credential. And so that's what Finish First NC does. It matches up all students against all of a college's programs to see which of those students have completed the credential but have not received it, and also which of those students are close to completing. And by that, I mean within 1 semester of completing a degree, diploma, or certificate. So it rapidly, in a matter of minutes, identifies students that can obtain a credential within 1 semester and those that have already fulfilled the requirements but have not received it. And so with the statewide initiative for Finish First NC, and we're taking the products and the results that we've seen at Wake Tech, and we're sharing access to this tool with the other 58 community colleges around the state, and with support from the system office, UNC system office, and grant support from the Belk Endowment, Lumina Foundation, and we have our independent evaluation team at the Belk Center. We're doing just that, and with the goal of increasing the number of adults in our state with credentials beyond high school. So what is the information that Finish First NC shows? Well, it shows what a student's closest pathway to completion is. And that could be that the student is closest to completing the credential that they declared, or it could be that the student is closer to some other credential that they might not be aware of. So it names that credential, that degree, diploma, or certificate, as well as the code that the student might be close to or has already completed. And also it expressly shares just how close that student is to completing it. But not only that, it goes further by sharing the specific courses that the student needs to take in order to complete it. And all of this adds up to you being able to, colleges being able to share in personalized outreach with the students. So instead of spending hours and hours, and by one count, we calculated at Wake Tech that for us to do with human hands what Finish First NC does, it would take 60 people working 52 weeks a year, no vacation, no sick time, anything like that, just on identifying these students. Well, Finish First NC does that in a matter of minutes. But because it also shares the student name and ID and contact information, colleges have access to this tool that readily provides information that they can go on to then share with personalized information with the student and say, Letitia Johnson or Juan Baez or whatever the student's name is, this is how close you are to a credential. This is what you need to do in order to obtain it. So almost 90% of colleges in the system use Finish First and See. The logos here have no, I'm not giving any preference to them, maybe Pitt County because that's my home county, but there are colleges that use it all over the state, large and small, and you can see how many of our colleges are using it. So why do colleges use Finish First and See? Well, it empowers advisors and students with information about their closest path to completion, and just how close they are to completing and what they need to do next, those actionable next steps. It increases colleges' completion rates, and I'll show you in just a moment some of the results that we're seeing so far. And there are also other opportunities that colleges can use the tool for to engage in effectiveness planning, scheduling for completion, and other things like that they can use the tool in order to serve the college and the students better. Namely, colleges use Finish First and See because it boosts student success and student completion. Okay, so now I want to share some of the impacts that we've seen and share some feedback with you that we've gotten. Now I'm going to air Wake Tech's dirty laundry a little bit here. So you can see everything on the left side of that red bar shows what our completions were prior to implementing Finish First and See. You can see that it's hovering around 4,000 or so. And then after Finish First and See, look at the stark jump that we see. It is closer now to about 8,000. So we were literally almost able to double our graduation rates by using our completion rates rather by using Finish First and See. And Kai and Brian jokingly say sometimes when we visit colleges that we're going to guarantee to double your graduation rate, your completion rate overnight, guaranteed, or your money back. And of course we could say that because we're not charging anybody, but it is something that we hope to be able to do. So what about other colleges? So here you have two examples of results from test runs that we do with colleges. Whenever we share the tool, we meet with them and make sure that everything is working fine. And we also get a snapshot of those credentials that Finish First identifies for that first time. So here on the left side of the screen, we have a small college. On the right side, we have a medium-sized college. And for both of these graphics, on the left side, we see what the colleges reported as their completions with iPads. And after that, in the middle bar, we see the completions that Finish First and See captured that the college missed. In other words, what this is the number of completions that colleges could have awarded to students, but did not award. So you can see a lot of those are here, and then also here for the medium-sized college as well, are certificates because that's the lowest hanging fruit, right? But in this case, the college could have almost, not quite, but almost doubled their graduation rate. And then even for this medium-sized, their completion rate rather, and for this medium-sized college, I mean, I don't know, what is that, 3, almost 4 times as much as the completion rate from what they reported in iPads. And then on the right-hand side of each of these graphs are those near completions. Again, those are the credentials that students can obtain within 1 semester if they take those courses and pass them, and they'll be able to obtain those credentials. So that's the credentials that Finish First and See identifies, and that's pretty typical from what we see with colleges. Now we have some more recent data that we've gathered that colleges have shared with us about how many of those credentials they're awarding. So we have the new completion credentials, and those are again those that students have already completed but were not awarded, and then the near completion credentials, those that were identified that students will be able to obtain within 1 semester. And for these, this is actually a bit of a trickier number to gather because what we were asking colleges to do was identify the credentials through Finish First in 1 semester, and then in the next semester tell us how many of those that they identified in the previous semester then went on to be awarded. So because of that and some other reasons, I'm highly confident that this is not all of the credentials that have been awarded. Nonetheless, this is about 30,000 right here across just 4 semesters, with not all of the colleges reporting. You can see between 26 and 32 colleges reporting in any given semester. So we are excited about this sort of impact that we're seeing that the tool is making. These are, in most of these cases, credentials that the students would have missed, but for Finish First and See. So it's increasing the number of completions that we're seeing in our state. So for all of the colleges that adopted Finish First and See, and we've shared the tool with over 50 colleges, for all of the colleges that adopted the tool between the 2016 to 2017 school year and the 2020-2021 academic year, there was an 11.7% increase in those colleges' completion rates. Now, those are all of the colleges. Some of them have come on as recently as last semester, and some have been using it for quite a while. But now let's look at the colleges that have been using it for a longer period of time. There was an initial group of colleges, 15 or so, that were in a pilot group. So for those colleges that have had a longer longer time using the tool, they're more acclimated with it now, they have their processes and procedures in place, they're seeing an even greater jump in their completion rates. So a 16.3% increase in their completion rates in that same 4-year period. Okay, so what are the students saying? So we don't have a whole lot of student feedback from Wake Tech students, but we did do a campaign with the outreach company Inside Track. We linked up with them. We provided the tech, they provided the outreach to the students, and they shared this feedback from students that they got. So this is one, and let me actually back up and say these were students that were very close to completion, within 1 semester of completion, but they had stopped out. So they weren't enrolled anymore. In some cases, we didn't know what was going to happen with them. They just weren't coming. So this student who had stopped out but was very close to completion said, honestly, if you hadn't called me, I would not have signed up for the classes at all. I really appreciate it. Another student said, I really want to finish. I've been working on this degree since 2010, so that's over 10 years, and only need one more class at this point. It's just the money situation. I think I'm eligible for a Pell Grant, but not sure. When I dropped the class because of COVID in the spring, I owed Wake Tech for some of the class that I dropped. Thanks so much for reaching out. I'll contact support tomorrow and email them about the scholarship. So we were able to offer a scholarship through our foundation as well. But this is some feedback that we've gotten from students. And I very often put myself in the position of a student. What would it feel like to be that student that gets that email, that phone call, that text saying, Layla, you're finished with this certificate, or you are one class away from your degree? How encouraging is that? So I count it a blessing really to be able to do what I do every day to serve our state and our students. Okay, so what are the users at our colleges saying? So I have a couple of snippets from them as well. We gather feedback every semester from the colleges, and this is our most recent consolidated feedback that we have from the spring semester. So one of our users said, we have a process in place called the credential discovery process. It was long and tedious to locate unawarded eligible credentials. Finish First has allowed me to locate potential credential recipients much faster and more accurately. And then another user said, advisors are using this report as a tool to help students plan and set goals. Our original plans for its use changed when we went to a continuous registration model where students can register for classes up to a year ahead of enrollment. Now it's a part of an arsenal of tools for advisors and used for outreach to students not registered for future terms. And I just love how this person who provided this feedback talked about how it's used for outreach. Again, you know, you don't have to spend time anymore doing the manual review of comparing one student transcript to one academic program and then the same transcript to the next academic program. That's in a matter of minutes. You can now devote that time to talking to these students, talking about what their pathway to completion looks like. Okay, so quick question for you. Take about 10 seconds and think about, in the course of 2 to 3 years, what are some reasons that a student might fail to complete and claim a degree? I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds. Okay, now I'm sure we all are probably thinking the same thing. For most of us, we're probably thinking money because that's a factor for students and the rest of us in the world alike, right? But there are a lot of reasons why a student might not get their degree. Let me rephrase that. There are a lot of reasons why a student might not complete his or her degree. And there are other reasons why a student might not complete and then claim that degree. So some of those might be a medical emergency. A student might need to support his or her family. They might need to go to work, a budgetary crisis. And you know, that might mean a flat tire. That might mean your transmission is out. And now you're one class away, but you're not getting your degree. That might mean, you know, lack of motivation. Maybe you did complete your credential, but you're not aware of it. Maybe you completed your credential, you're aware of it, but you transferred to NC State instead of picking up your degree from Wake Tech. This is actually a story that we've heard told. So there are a lot of reasons, is my point, why a student might do everything right, and not get that credential, or might have obstacles in completing their credential. And we all know this, right? But the point is, this is a tool that can help your students, help our students complete and claim those credentials. I'm running out of time, so I won't go into everything that I want to say about alignment to the NCCCS in terms of how this helps, but I will just say that there is a very strong alignment to the clear and supportive pathways for student progress and success, and also the economic and workforce impact. And then also, I love President Stitt's pillars. So there's a lot of alignment here too. I actually have a document that I've worked up. I'd love to share it with you if you're interested in kind of the specific ways that Finish First can help accomplish President Stitt's pillars. So if you're interested in it, shoot me an email. I will send it out to you. I'm really excited about what we're doing here and how it's helping our students, my fellow North Carolinians all over the state. And just to sum up everything though, since I don't have time to get into everything that I want, you know, Finish First is helping our students, those who have missed completions, those who might not realize that despite all of their hard work, all of their toil, you know, because they had to stop out for some reason, they might not even realize that they actually have finished their credential. Or for those that are 1, 2, 3 courses away, this is highlighting and illuminating that clear pathway to completion for them. And not just of their credential, right? Any credential, it's showing them their closest pathway to completion. We talked about the enrollment decline that we've been seeing in the last 10 years. There are opportunities to help with strategic re-enrollment of students, especially those that have stopped out and we don't know what's going on with them. And then again, that personalized student-focused outreach, this helps with that as well. Efficiency for our students in the educational process, and what we're all looking for, that labor market impact for a student who previously did not have their credential in hand, and then whammo, they do. So we are so excited about the work that we're doing with Finish First NC. We are honored to serve the people of our state. If you scan that QR code in the however many seconds I have remaining, that will take you to this URL. You can also type it in if you like, waketech.edu/FFNC. Feel free to shoot me an email if you're interested in any other information that I can send, or if you have any questions, or if you want to collaborate in some way. We're happy to connect with y'all. So thanks so much.
All right, excellent. So we had Caroline, who's involved in every initiative ever conceived in North Carolina from the governor's office. We've got Emily, who is at one of our strong partners, university partners, but is working the NC Impact Initiative and many other things, actually. She didn't go into everything that she's involved in. And then Layla, who is one of our superstars from one of our colleges, working on the Finish First tool. So JW, these ladies would love to entertain some questions. If we have any questions, I think we still have a few minutes, right?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Go ahead and unmute your microphones or put them in the chat. If you have any questions that you'd like to pose to our panelists, to kind of get things going, I'll throw one out to Emily that popped in my mind when you were speaking. And that is, can you talk a little bit about how to meet our attainment goal? It's not just associate degrees. That a lot of times I think people think automatically associate degrees, and they don't think about the potentials of the credentials that are in Workforce CE and the diplomas and so forth.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, JW. And for the purpose of the statewide goal and for the purpose of our project, we're really careful to say credentials and not just degrees. So certificates, diplomas, all those things Layla talked about, that they're helping people identify that they're close to completion for, or they've already earned. And I know a lot of you are probably involved in the credentials of value work that the system and folks from My Future NC and other partners are doing to make sure we know what all those credentials of value are in our state, and that we're counting those toward accomplishing our goal, and that we're providing the supports and the financial aid to students so that they can pursue those, especially on the continuing education side and not just on the curriculum side.
I think we have a little bit of Zoom fatigue here. So we'll wait just a second longer to see if we have any questions for our panelists and for our presentations. One of the other thing I was thinking the entire time was that I think each of your all's presentations could easily be a 1-hour presentation in and of itself because it was such great information and opportunities to partner. I hope that you can share your slides if you haven't already with Matt or myself. And we'll get the recording and the slides out to all the participants. To our participants, I hope that you will reach out if you think of ways that you want to partner with these groups and to work with them to help you better serve your colleges. One thing, I'll pause there before I start any closing comments. Matt, do you have anything you want to add, or Caroline or Layla or Emily?
No, again, that if you do have questions, once you get back to your college, you probably all are at your colleges, but once you get back to work, these three ladies, I know they would be Johnny on the spot to help or answer questions anytime. You can use me as a conduit to them. We can get you their email information, but there's some good things happening in the state, and we got 3 of them that I'm looking at right now. So.
Yeah, that's great. Ladies, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'll just say, again, it's such a pleasure. I'll speak for myself, and I know I can also speak for my team as well, just to serve the students and the folks of our state and your colleges as well. I interface daily with folks from not quite all 58, but over 50 of our colleges, and I know how hard everybody is working. I see a couple of familiar names here, but if there's anything that I can do, that our team can do to help push y'all forward and the great work that you're already doing, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Well, then I'll go ahead and bring our sessions to a close here today. One last comment that I'd like to make before we stop for the day is one of the reasons why I thought that this panel, and thank you, Matt, for bringing everybody together, was so important is we wanted to demonstrate that if you're sitting at your college and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how do I solve this problem? Or, hey, I want to improve in this area. It's kind of like when you're in Excel workbook and you're going, there's got to be an easier way to do that. You just need to go ask somebody down the hallway how to do it easier. That's the way that we want to serve you here at the system office, is that same concept. So if you're dealing with something and you're thinking, there's got to be a way that's easier and better to do whatever I'm trying to do. I mean, Caroline and Emily and Layla here are 3 examples of resources that Matt knows about. And so please reach out to either Matt, myself, Gilda, Lane, Lisa, Nate. You've met them all over the past, this marathon of webinars that we've had. Please reach out to us because we want to do our best to help you so you can better serve your students. So without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and turn the recording off and call it a day, because my guess is we all have an inbox full of emails at this point. So you all have a great evening. Bye-bye.